The weather that day was not ideal, as they mentioned. There was a storm warning, but Alex did not pay much attention to it, which he later regretted greatly. The trees in the street bent under the strong winds, making it seem like they were about to be uprooted. The hurricane lifted up whole columns of dust and ruffled the grass, scattering debris along the road. Alex felt comfortable, but he knew that warmth and comfort would not be reliable. At first, he watched the scene with curiosity from the chaotic outside. However, he soon realized the dangers of the storm. He was concerned that if a tree collapsed on his car, rescuers would have a hard time coming to help in such bad weather, as people usually preferred not to leave their homes. The usually busy highway was completely empty. Alex saw the last car in minutes. Minutes ago, the house was no more than 10 kilometers away, and Alex continued to drive forward. Suddenly, there was a deafening crash, and he slammed on the brakes. A huge tree had fallen across the road, blocking half of it with its sprawling branches. Despite the distance to the barrier, Alex was overcome by fear of the power of nature and decided to stop to calm down. The car was parked in a small depression where the wind was weaker than in the open area. Alex took a deep breath, looked around, and noticed that even the car doors could be opened without risk. But as soon as he started the engine again, something caught his attention on the side of the road amidst the grass. Alex moved closer and stood up to get a better look, but the dusk light and thick grass prevented him from seeing clearly. Having made up his mind, Alex got out of the car. The icy wind chilled him immediately, but he overcame the cold and headed towards the place where he saw movement under the bushes. He found a cat whose head was stuck in a narrow tin can. The tall tin was placed on the animal, and the cat desperately shook his head, trying to get out of his prison, but to no avail. Alex cautiously approached the animal, hearing footsteps over the noise of the wind. The cat froze when the man took another step, and his stomach started to run, but not seeing the road in front of him, the tin can crashed into Alex. The cat sat on its hind legs and whined loudly, and Alex involuntarily laughed. However, a moment later, he imagined himself in the place of the unfortunate animal, and his smile immediately disappeared. The man pulled his hands out of his pockets, which were already starting to freeze. Alex stretched out his hand to the cat, but the frightened creature jumped up and slipped between the rocks, running away. "You're going to starve or get run over," Alex thought. He took another step to help, but the cat moved further away. At that moment, the first drops of rain started to fall from low, dark clouds. They mixed with water and made their way down his collar. Despite the inconvenience, Alex decided not to give up on the poor animal and tried to help. After a couple of quick steps, he caught up with the cat and firmly grabbed it by the scruff. However, his attempts to remove the jar from the cat's head were unsuccessful, and his frozen fingers began to tremble. The man gave up on all efforts, returned to the car, and placed the cat in the passenger seat. Alex turned on the ignition, but immediately heard a menacing hiss and a low, drawn-out howl from the jar on the cat's head. Warm them and restore their sensitivity, then carefully reach out to the animal, trying not to scare it. Alex carefully turned the tin can and finally freed the cat as soon as he could. The cat jerked violently, hissed shrilly, and tried to strike. The man quickly took his hands away with his paw, and the animal, hissing incessantly, stared at the jar as if it were to blame for all its troubles. He put the tin can in the pocket of the car door, and only then did the cat fall silent for a while. But the silence did not last long. The next second, the beast jumped up on the seat in panic, ran around the cabin, then hid in a corner of the dashboard away from the driver, and began to look around warily. It was obvious that this was the first time the cat had been in a car. Alex wondered how the animal had ended up there on a deserted highway. It was several kilometers to the nearest settlement. Did the cat get there with a jar on his head from the city, or was it just taken out and left there? This thought seemed to Alex. The improbable-looking cat looked terrible. Dirty, matted fur, dried tears in the corners of its eyes, garbage on its tail. The animal's reaction to any human movement was so acute that it became clear that it had been communicating with people for a very long time. If it had ever communicated at all, Alex's attempt to approach the animal caused a new wave of hysteria. The cat hissed so loudly that Alex's ears were almost blocked. Alex, who had encountered loud cats before, was surprised by the shrill singing. He tried to calm the beast calmly, but only made the situation worse, as the cat howled even louder than him. The panicked look on the cat's face made Alex feel sorry for the animal. He didn't want to tame it by force. Moreover, the man would not have even noticed the cat if it weren't for the trees that fell on the road. The idea of taking the cat to the city to attach it to someone seemed impossible. It seemed reasonable for Alex to try to calm the animal. However, every time he tried, his efforts ended in failure. After sitting down comfortably for a while, the man provoked a new reaction from the cat, which jumped over the back of the passenger seat and hid behind the headboard of the rear seat. Sighing heavily, Alex decided that it wasn't worth continuing to try. To torture an animal, and if it is resistant to help, the man opened the back door and said, "Go if you want." However, the cat, in spite of the offer, Svobody, stepped back, hiding behind the seat. As soon as the man returned to his seat, the animal's curiosity got the better of it. It carefully stuck out its muzzle and began to sniff the air and examine the frosty weather and bent trees. The cat wasn't scared, but it clearly didn't want to stay outside. No, it wouldn't work that way. Alex frowned. "You either get out, or come with me. I'm not going to wait here until the weather changes." When the cat calmed down, it didn't react in any way. He cast a displeased glance at the man, slowly reading the children. Alex realized that the cat was not going to come out. Then he slammed the door. The animal shuddered and hissed, but this time it did not howl. Making sure that the cat had calmed down, the man started the engine and carefully drove off. Around a fallen tree, Alex found himself back on the highway, where the wind was raging. He felt a slight anxiety. A few kilometers remained until the Immerse city, and he hoped that among the high-rise buildings, he would be able to hide from the elements. On the way, the cat behaved strangely. Surprised, Alex looked around several times to make sure everything was in order. The animal, clutching the seat with its claws, tried to keep from shaking, watched the landscape outside the window with wide eyes. This sight caused Alex's slight smile, making him think that perhaps their meeting was not accidental. Not knowing how to deal with the cat, Alex couldn't come to a decision for a long time. In such cloudy and unpleasant weather, wandering around with friends trying to accommodate the animal seemed like a little attractive activity. So he decided to leave it in his apartment for at least a while. At first, another problem arose. How to pick up a wild animal. Alex tried to reach the cat, but it attacked him. Then he remembered that his sister had bought a carrier for her cat. She was surprised when he called her. She asked if everything was fine. He explained that he had finished his business trip 2 days earlier than planned because he completed the task faster. He did not want to stay in a strange city and decided to go home. Alex carefully prepared the carrier and poured some food inside. The cat, cautiously, squinted at the man and smelled the food. Alex hid behind the seat, trying not to scare the animal. The cat relaxed and took the first step towards the carrier. The food, carefully scattered to the end of the carrier, beckoned the cat further and further until it finally entered the carrier. When Alex slammed the door shut, the cat began to hiss and growl. The man remained unperturbed, knowing that the cat would eventually calm down. After making sure the cat was safe, Alex breathed a sigh of relief. He had finally caught the wild bird on his way home from the supermarket. He needed to replenish the food for the guest, so he made a quick trip to the store. After purchasing the necessary supplies, he drove home late in the evening. He parked his car in the garage and quickly ran up the stairs, relieved to finally reach his apartment door. Although the cat continued to hiss occasionally, Alex carefully placed it on the floor in the hallway. He knew it was better not to let the curious neighbor know about the new addition to his household just yet. The animal still showed signs of interest in the situation. Alex quickly had a snack, glanced at the carrier but did not dare to let the cat out. He first removed all the breaking and heavy objects from the kitchen, prepared a bowl of water and some food, and then moved the carrier to the corner of the room nearby. As he walked away, he muttered, "Go eat. I won't disturb you." He carefully closed the door behind him, leaving the cat alone while it was in a new environment. Alex decided that he needed to let the animal get used to its surroundings and calm down before thinking about the bathroom. After some time, he looked in the kitchen. The food had disappeared from the carrier, and there was a quiet growl. Alex closed the door and went to bed, feeling tired after his business trip and worried. "Now I just need to get enough sleep," he thought. While Alex was sleeping, the cat was awake and the door to the kitchen was open. The door was ajar, and the animal took advantage of the opportunity to get out, exploring the new space. He moved around the apartment cautiously, sniffing, but that night he was offered a wild but not so scared cat. On the threshold of the room, it froze, not daring to enter. Alex, breathing evenly and deeply, was sleeping calmly in his bed. The cat, noticing this, deftly slipped under the chair next to the bed and lay there as if holding its breath. Although the owner of the apartment was unaware of the animal, I heard the front door creak softly, as if there were cautious footsteps and a sound like someone was sure that no one was there. There were shoes on the threshold and a jacket hanging, and I'm sure the owner would definitely not appear for a couple of days. Let's quickly collect everything valuable and leave without turning on the lights. The neighbors may notice two vague shadows moving cautiously down the hall. One stopped at the doorway. As she walked into the living room, allowing the dim light from the street lamp to enter the room, Alexa noticed the stranger. She was startled for a moment as she approached the man who was sleeping in the chair. The stranger froze, unsure of what to do next, but Alexa's cat, who had already been in a state of extreme stress, didn't allow him to think for long. The animal was not used to unfamiliar things, strange smells, or being in such a situation. In situations like this, when you see someone approaching, the cat arch his back, release sharp claws, and sensing danger, let out a loud hiss that turns into a piercing howl. It was unexpected in the silence of the night, even for the cat himself. But he didn't stop. On the contrary, he howled even louder, not understanding what was happening. The stranger standing next to him suddenly recoiled, confused, and hit his forehead against the door jamb with a thud. The blow was accompanied by a painful thud, and the man immediately sank to the floor unconscious. The second attacker, hearing the noise, jumped out into the corridor, after seeing his accomplice fall to the floor. He rushed to the exit, flew out through the open door, rushed down the stairs. His cat still did not stop, and its screams became louder and louder. The animal could not calm down, shocked by the presence of strangers. Alex finally realized the source of the noise and reached for the light switch. Turning on the light, he was frozen in shock. A stranger lay motionless on the floor, a man under his head. I was confused for a moment, but when I heard the front door slam, I grabbed a heavy desk lamp from the table and went out into the hallway. But the apartment was empty, and I slammed at the front door. Going to the window, Alex noticed the second thief jump into the car and drive away, leaving the lamp behind. He hurried to call the police and an ambulance, checking the stranger's pulse carefully. To his relief, he felt a faint beating. After turning the stranger over, he saw his face covered in blood. Not knowing how to help, Alex wrapped the intruder's hands to protect himself in case the stranger woke up. The cat calmed down once the owner left the room, but this did not bother Alex anymore. Who were these people, and why did the sirens sound under his windows? A man interrupted his thoughts and ran out to meet the police and paramedics. How did a man with a head injury and tied hands end up in his apartment? The policeman asked calmly. Alex tried to explain about the cat, who scared the thief with his behavior. The police were skeptical about Alex's story, so they began to investigate the apartment. The officers recorded traces of blood on the door frame and the frame of a neighbor, who witnessed the night commotion. One of the officers dared to enter Alex's bedroom, and the cat hissed loudly. The noise made everyone jump, including the tenants. At that moment, one of the police officers who was interrogating Alex immediately grabbed his gun holster, prepared for any eventuality. The loud meow of the cat woke the thief from a deep sleep. The criminal groaned abruptly and, meeting the police officer's gaze, began to rush around, almost howling impossibly. He smiled slyly, raised his eyebrows, and said, "Well, what do you still need? Don't believe it." His voice sounded with a note of amusement. The police officers, having figured out the source of the noise, immediately looked under the bed. The beams of the flashlights illuminated the culprit of the commotion, the cat, who, thinking he was being attacked, immediately rushed towards the offenders. One of the police officers, showing an instant reaction, managed to avoid meeting with sharp claws. Otherwise, the case could have ended in serious injuries. The complicated operation of putting the cat into the carrier turned into a real spectacle. Everyone present took part in it. The mission was like a well-organized rescue team. Alex, exhausted after such a performance, was reassured by the police that the animal would be sent to the vet for testing. They assured him that they would report the results after the cat had finished its examination. There was no doubt about Alex's unplanned demonstration. It became quite obvious how the thief had broken into his house. This incident clarified many details. No one asked questions about the tape on his hands. The proceedings related to the incident lasted almost all night. When the thief realized that escape was impossible, he named the accomplice who had managed to escape and described the details in detail. Another team was immediately called to detain the accomplice. To Alex's surprise, it soon became clear that the gunman was the same neighbor who had been visiting him. He feared the most that an elderly woman whom he trusted would turn out to be cunning, calculating. Using her sociability and assertiveness, she easily extracted the necessary information from the tenants. So, Alex, deciding to get rid of her, endless visits, announced that he was going on a business trip without wasting time. The neighbor passed this information on to her accomplices. After this incident, the whole house was animatedly discussing the criminal tendencies of the pensioner. Suspecting her of Alex himself, ignoring the neighbor's conversations, was busy, solving pressing problems. At first I waited for the arrival of the locksmith to install a new lock, and then I ran around the city all day looking for a veterinarian who would dare to examine the cat. The animal turned out to be extremely unwell. As soon as it was stitched up and waved its paw, the doctors immediately refused attempts to approach only one veterinarian, armed with a special glove with a thick plastic lining. He was able to take a blood sample from the animal for analysis. Fortunately, the cat did not have rabies. Returning home, Alex placed the carrier on the floor, opened the door, and offered the cat a bowl of food. With a soft smile, he said, "You know, I've changed my mind. I'm not going to find a new home for you. If you want to stay with me, we'll be friends. I'll name you Tiger Cub. We'll get to know each other and you'll become a domestic cat." The cat looked at him in disbelief, but surprisingly did not hiss. This was the start of a new and strong friendship.